Talking about quite a few different topics today. Weight loss, infertility, eating disorders, but again, triumph at the end of all of that stuff. So with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to let Tricia kind of take the reins of the conversation here to start. I'm going to have her share, where her journey kind of started from point A all the way up until she found MP. So Tricia, why don't you just go ahead and start at the beginning and we'll just work our way through this.
How much time do we have?
We got about 30 minutes.
Okay. No, I think my journey, I think it's always it started in childhood. My issues with weight and things like that has always been there. I think it stems from an issue with food because I grew up in a household where everyone was on a diet, and everyone was analyzing what they ate in terms of how they looked. And so I grew up with that mentality about food on what is, food. Certain foods are absolutely bad. And certain food, it's this relationship that's super unhealthy. And as a child, I remember even in grade school thinking that I needed to lose weight, that I just wasn't enjoying myself as a child, which is incredibly sad. And so I don't think I had a healthy relationship with food until just even a few years ago, which is an incredibly long time. I'm 36. Absolutely. So what started in childhood is just an obsession about what I was eating and how much I was eating, turned into college Tricia not eating at all. Okay. And so that turned into finding diet pills and sugar. I'm talking a lot of details here, sorry. Turned into me thinking that I could lose weight faster if I took the pills and didn't eat. So I would find myself eating maybe 400, 500 calories a day. There were a couple of times where I passed out. Wow. But the thing about it is I got compliments. People like, oh my gosh, you look so healthy. Oh my gosh, people gained the freshman 15 and you lost it. Look at you go. No one knew what was going on.
Yeah, nobody knew.
And so I never got to the point where I looked like someone who had an eating disorder, right? So no one questioned it. And then on top of it, I had a lot of issues with my ovaries and cysts and things like that. So the passing out and things, people assumed probably was a hormonal thing, and maybe it was my birth control not working, or just the side effects of a lot of different things. And so I never really got the chance at that age to get the intervention that I needed. So I kind of had to dig myself out of it. I don't know if there was a single moment where I was like, okay, this has to change. I think I always knew it. I always had that feeling that I knew that this wasn't the appropriate way to go about things, but it was the only thing that I could control and I could keep going with.
Which is really insane because now this is like the first time that we've talked about this, and I will share with you as well that in my younger years I struggled with bulimia, and I worked my way out of it too. So a lot of the things that you're saying is like, that was so me, because it was like nobody had any idea. My family didn't know, nobody knew, my friends didn't know. I just and I was into fitness at that time, so that was even a double-edged sword, because I was not practicing what I was preaching, and I was binging and purging, and nobody had a clue. And I same thing, I knew that I'm like, this is not the way this is supposed to go. And I, similar to your story, kind of had to dig my way out of it too. So that's a hard road to toe.
And this is actually the first time I think a lot of people, if there's probably anybody in this group, I've talked about it. I don't think I've really talked about it with my family or friends or anybody. So this is really the first time I've talked about, I've talked about it with anyone, because I think a lot of it was, I did lose a lot of weight. I lost, with these bad habits and this disorder, I lost about 55 pounds. Wow, okay. In a short amount of time, but when no one sees you because you're in college, no one really, so it was, I don't remember where I was going with that, but I think it was, I didn't look it. I still had so much weight to lose that I was all of a sudden in a normal weight range, that a lot of people looked at it as me just being, not snacking, right? And and they wanted to know my secrets, and then that became the excuse. Oh, I've stopped snacking in between, you know, I don't keep snacks in my dorm room. Oh, I'm just eating more vegetables, and all the things you should do,
Which you weren't doing.
which I wasn't doing. And then there were a couple women, when I started to realize that this wasn't a healthy thing, there were a couple women that lived in the dorms with me, and they were super into fitness and like piles of food on their plate because the proteins and like the things that you're supposed to eat.
Right.
So I started hanging out with them a little bit, and then that was that sort of got me out of the starving myself. But then that flipped into not working out, but also binging, and I realized later on that I'm a stress eater, and we talked about that during my 6 weeks. Like, I have some really, 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 really strong binging like triggers,
Right.
and that's doing the 6 week challenge was one of the ways that I could, like, again, it was one of those things. I knew what I was doing, and then I knew that it wasn't healthy, but I did it because I could control it, even though I wasn't, right? So doing the 6 week challenge was a way for me, I think, to finally re-trigger my brain to be like, okay, this isn't healthy. And ultimately it was like, how long ago was that? Like 15 years? It was 15 years of me figuring out how food worked in my system. So the fact that I can eat ice cream is fine.
Right.
And knowing how that processes and getting knowledge in how food processes and creates energy and things like that. And I'm one of those people that when something happens, or if I really need to understand something, I like try to gain as much knowledge as possible, which leads to infertility. That was also the catalyst. I've been dealing with infertility for the better part of a decade, about 8 or 9 years now. And knowing that I was going to have a child, I didn't want that child to see me struggle with my weight like it was a huge deal, and it was...
You did when you were a kid.
Right. And not saying that the women in my family are terrible for that. It's just kind of how, unfortunately, a lot of society...
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. So if you guys are just tuning in, we're talking to Tricia Miller here. She's talking to us a lot about her journey from early childhood, kind of walking into unknowingly an eating disorder and working through that for at least half of her life. And then now we're kind of moving on to her journey through infertility and working her way kind of out of that rut and kind of finding the positive side of all of this stuff. So let's talk a little bit more about finding MP, the infertility, you know, the surgery that you've gone through, and kind of your way to triumph through all that stuff.
I've been through 6 surgeries since I was 21. When I was 21, there was a benign growth, it's called a dermoid cyst, which is essentially a benign tumor that grew around my right ovary, and it basically encapsulated it so they couldn't recover it. So I had an ovary removal when I was 21, and ever since then, about like almost like clockwork, about every 3 years I have a cyst removed from my left. I'm not polycystic. I don't have PCOS. I'm kind of in the category where they don't know what's going on. They just know I get them. And so that led, that led into, because the loss of the ovary, not necessarily because of that, but because of my chronic cysts, we knew that it was probably going to take a little bit more for me to get pregnant. We didn't realize it was going to take IVF at this point. So we started trying, like the whole trying, like not preventing, but not really actively trying. Right before we got married, because we didn't think that it was going to happen right away. We didn't realize that it was going to take 4 years for me to have a successful pregnancy. And that was about 4 years ago. I got pregnant through IUI, which is intrauterine insemination, which is, if you don't know, there's IUI and then there's IVF. IUI is just basically giving the swimmers a little extra head start, whereas IVF is taking everything out and a lot more laboratory in depth. And so we got pregnant, we were super excited, and we hit the 12-week mark, which is after the first trimester, you get into second trimester. After that, the rate of miscarriage goes down to 4%.
Right.
In first trimester, it's about 80,
Yep.
which a lot of people don't realize.
Which is why a lot of people don't usually
Exactly.
tell their families or whatever until the 12-week mark
Exactly.
because of the statistics on the first, how critical the first trimester
Exactly.
is. Okay.
Exactly. So we thought we were in that safe zone, and then one night that happened. So I was about 17 weeks. I just hit the 17-week mark, and then I had a miscarriage, and it was devastating. It caused a lot. I've always dealt with depression, but this was the first time I think I was actively diagnosed with it, and it was a rough. I will talk about this to anyone who wants to talk about it. I'm not afraid to talk about it, because I feel like a lot of times women are put in a position where they feel like they can't, and I don't want that to be the case. So I'm always open if there's somebody who wants to talk about their journey. I will always gladly listen, because it was it's a weird club to be a part of when you have a pregnancy loss, because all of a sudden people that you've known for years, people in your family, people that are close friends, all of a sudden they realize that they're comfortable enough.
It's just coming out of the woodwork.
And they're like, oh, this happened to me too. And I can't describe how awful the experience was, but what came out of it was me realizing the reason. So I have it's cervical insufficiency, sometimes referred to as incontinent cervix. I just say that my cervix is weak and dumb.
It's great.
I don't necessarily, there's no amount of Kegels in the world is going to help it. Right. It's just how it is. The doctors in the hospital said that I was a clear-cut case for it. And I immediately set out to the internet to look, and I tried to steer clear of the WebMD where everything is, I'm gonna die.
Yeah. All of a sudden, self-diagnosing yourself.
Right.
Stuff, yeah.
But I wanted to know.
Is that what that's called?
Yeah, I'm I've never heard of cervical insufficiency before, so I went to the internet and I immediately started looking up definitions, and it turns out that at the time that this happened, one of the top doctors in the country, one of 3 doctors in the country there's a procedure called transabdominal cerclage. Okay. So typically when this sort of thing happens, they can put a cerclage in, which is just basically a stitch. It's a purse stitch on your cervix, so it closes your cervix. They can do that while you're pregnant, but it's lower on your cervix and it's temporary, and a lot of times many women will be on bed rest for their entire pregnancy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they will deliver prematurely. However, if you are diagnosed with it, there is a transabdominal cerclage, which is a permanently placed stitch at the top of the cervix. And at the time that this happened to me, one of the top doctors that did this pre-pregnancy was out of the University of Chicago.
Oh, wow.
And when I learned that, it was one of those situations where I felt like it would just be silly for us to not look forward in this, and that was the plan. And that's kind of how I battled that hole that I had dived into. At the same time was, okay, how can I make sure that this doesn't happen again, or at least from this reason. Right. And so taking those steps was what did it for me. And it wasn't and then it was about the mental part. Now that I have the physical part taken care of, then it was the mental part, which therapy. And we still see our grief counselor, because I knew that once we got pregnant, I would need that again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So we still see her, and she's amazing. And so talking to somebody was a big thing for me. Yeah, that was a lot of me talking.
That's okay. So let's talk about how weight loss kind of came into that for you, how getting back into the gym and knowing that, losing weight was a part of being able to get pregnant because of all of the challenges that you face. You don't want another challenge on top of all of that stuff, but this challenge is one that you can control. Yeah. This one is the one that's in your control, and you're the person that kind of is in the driver's seat when it comes to your weight. So talk about about the weight loss journey for you and kind of the control that you felt in that sense of being able to like control your health.
It started, it's weird. It started with my sister. My sister is very active, really into health and fitness, but also being mindful of what she eats as far as whole grains, veggies, and fruits, not in the same way that I was in college. I think for me, I know I'm overweight, but it was beyond that. It was the fact that I couldn't walk upstairs because my legs ached too much. I would go to bed at the end of the night and every single joint in my body would just hurt.
Okay.
And I just didn't feel good. And I knew that part of that, I didn't want to be on medications yet. If there were things that I could do to stave that off.
Right.
So I knew that I needed to do something.
Right.
And I knew I needed to do something in a healthy, proactive manner. And so that's how I found this. I found it through the 6-week challenge.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
So now that we know a lot about you, which is great,
Yes,
I'm hoping that the people that are watching, I think we kind of lost Facebook there for just a second. I think Marcia might be working on that, but we're still on Instagram. So for those of you who are watching, we're sitting here, if you're just tuning in with Tricia Miller, she's one of our members. She's been with us since April of last year, and talking a lot about her journey from childhood to growing into an eating disorder to working her way out of that to infertility and miscarriage, and now working on her weight loss journey and getting back in the saddle of getting pregnant and working towards that.
Yes.
So with that being said, let's talk about how were you able to stay so, I know you talked about depression and things like that, but how were you able to stay so positive throughout your entire life? Because there's a lot of people in this world that would have just like been done a long time ago. So talk about, was it your family support? Was it just like your mental clarity? Talk about how you were able to stay positive through all this.
I put up a good front. But honestly, at the beginning of the point in the miscarriage, it was hard for me to even get out of bed, obviously. I mean, I don't need to explain that. But for me, it was because I just needed to persevere. And that's where it started. It was just every day I told myself, you know what, just get up. And if you can get up, then you can take the next step. And then it turned into, I have a ridiculously supportive husband.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he's amazing. Let's gush about him for a second. Brian is amazing. Anything I set my mind to do, I'm like, okay, this is what I want to try. He'll never tell me no. He's always like, yeah, let's do it.
Right.
If we can make it work, let's do it. And we have the same goal in mind as being as far as our partnership and our marriage. And so that also helps.
Yep.
My family, like my sister, my brother, my mom, they're all kind of my best friends. And they all have kids. My brother and my sister now have kids. And so that also helps because I want to be there for them and I want to be active for them. And so knowing that they're there and that I want to be there for them helps me have the clarity of mind to know that I can get through it.
Right.
I hope that answered your question.
I think what it boils down to is support. It's the people that you surround yourself with and the people that you're surrounded with. Tricia's super active with her nephew, by the way.
Yes.
She's got a really super cute nephew that she's always doing stuff with, which is awesome. And I think
have a lot of nephews now in Illinois.
That's awesome. So there's one time in particular after a parade that she was running around with him after the parade, and I think it was a pretty joyous moment for you just to be able to like run and like play and do those things without barely even a struggle.
And that was one of the coolest things, and it was after was it Labor Day?
It's September Fest, I think.
Yeah. And we had just walked that whole thing, and I had been trying to find them in the crowd. My sister had brought my nephew Hunter, with in the family, and my niece, my new baby niece, Paulina, and Axel, her boyfriend. Just thought I'd name drop there. No, they were there, and we couldn't find each other, and it wasn't until after the parade that we found each other, and then he was all hyped up because I walked in the parade, and I was like, let's race, because he knows that I go to the gym now, and he's all excited, and he wants to work out whenever anybody works out, he always wants to join in, and so that was fun, and I remember we just did like a sprint race down a hill and back up. And I remember I was winded, but I was just like, I could do that again.
Right.
And that's when it clicked for me that I was doing something right.
Right.
I was finally doing it right.
Right. I think that's the transition for you from being skinny to being strong, right? Which you mentioned in your bio that you sent to us is more of the mindset shift for you is now like, it's not about me being skinny, it's about me being the healthiest version of myself that I could possibly be, whatever body that ends up looking like.
Right.
I think, there's so much in society these days still of like, you have to look a certain way, and if you don't have a Kim Kardashian butt, then you are not, you don't belong on the big screen and whatever else. And I think that coming to MP is the complete opposite of that. I think the mantra that is kind of just spread throughout this community is that it's not about what you look like, it's about how you feel. It's about being the best version of yourself that you can possibly be. So I think a couple key points that we can take away from this is, number one, you have to have a good support system. Anything that you go through, having an amazing support system is like a key. The people around you, you are the equivalent of 5 people that you surround yourself with. So if you surround yourself with super positive and impactful people, it's going to make your life that much better. Number 2, shifting your mindset, especially if you struggle with eating disorders and like body image issues and self-confidence. It's a mindset shift, and it's not a quick one. That doesn't happen fast.
I mean, case in point, I battled it in true battled it in college, and I'm 36 now, and I really didn't have that wake-up call until probably last year. Right. Like, it is a constant thing, and I still have moments where I'm just like, ugh, and I'm like pinching my love handles, and I'm like, this is gross, but I find myself...
It's almost like slapping yourself on the
face. Like, that's exactly what I do, and I'm like, stop it.
Yep.
Let's take a moment, regroup.
Yep.
Having boundaries is also really important. So if you have those friends that you love and adore, or if you have those family members that you love and adore that are like that with themselves, I find that I have to tell them, you know what? I think you're beautiful. We need to talk about anything else.
Right. Besides that, you need to go eat a salad or go run because you had a piece of ice cream cake. Right. Yep. I totally get that. I think that, again, it's about, you can always do that in a very nice and polite way.
Exactly.
But you have to be slightly selfish when it comes to those kind of people. You have to just be like, hey, like you said, I love you and I appreciate you and you're a beautiful human, but like I can't, like I really would prefer to talk about something else besides that. Because at the end of the day, you are a fragile mind with all of the things that you go through, and especially when it comes to like body image issues and self-confidence issues, you are super fragile for a lot of part of your life. I mean, I still am. Crying out loud, I got dressed the other day and I was crying because I'm like, I don't feel pretty today.
It happens at least once a week.
I mean, it is what it is, but it's like, then you're like, no, like I'm beautiful, and the skin that I have, and God made me the way that He made me, and this is the life that I have to live, and this is how I'm going to do it. So that's great. I want to talk a little bit about your favorite parts of MP. Okay. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what you love so much about being here and how it's kind of impacted your life in a positive way.
Yeah, I made really good friends. It's really nice to walk through the door of a place and be greeted with someone by your name with a smile, and then know them as well. It's not just, rote memorization of that's who that person is. And then just being in class with people that you have things in common with, or you just have fun with. Like, there's not a class that I go to that I don't know someone. And if I don't know someone, I make sure that I do by the end of the class. It's just a fun place to be. And that's also part of why I continued, after the 6 weeks, I joined up, because I was like, I've never felt this before. Like, at a big box location, you go there and you're just
you're just a key tag swipe.
Right. And here with the group fitness, I knocked my, with like group fitness and being in the same room with friends and with the coaches who, you get along with so well, and everyone's super supportive of one another during class, and that's probably, the camaraderie is probably my favorite. Yeah.
I think that to testament to you is that it's not like you said, it's not just like they know your name and you know who you know them on a deeper level. Like you've gotten to know them and their family and their lives and what they do for work and what their sisters do, and they're starting to invite you to weddings and bachelorette parties and brunches, and like you create these bonds with people that's outside of the gym, and they're the people that you can have conversations with that aren't like, oh, I'm slow fat. Like you guys all enjoy the same thing and you all lift each other up, and I think that's what's great.
Yeah, and it's great, and it's like when you do have those conversations or you do have those moments where you do share that, because I think sometimes we just do. Even with the friends I've made here, the MP girls, we still have those moments, but then we can also take it away and be like, oh, I think I'm just going to do an extra day this week, or we can flip out of that really quickly, which is really, really nice. We don't dwell on it because we're all in here for the same reason.
Right, exactly. Yep, exactly. It's a lot of empowerment and uplifting, and especially when you come out of such dark things, it's always great to find a little light in your life and like be able to come in here and like, even if you've had a really crappy day, just at least feel like a breath of fresh air when you come in here and you see your friends and you get greeted at the door and you get a great workout and you just have this feeling of euphoria and positivity, which is always nice to have that little, like I said, breath of fresh air.
I think I've posted that once. I think, and I don't remember who it was, but they posted about how they were having a really hard time mentally and with depression, and how do people make it to class? And I sort of just said, you show up. And it's such an easy thing to say. But I found that on the days where I have those moments, which I still do, where it's just really hard to get out of bed, I will still keep my workout because I feel like even if I had the world's crappiest day outside, I can come here, work out, and I may look like a crab working out. I may just look really sullen working out, but I'm working out whatever's going on in my head, and by the end of it, I'm fine.
Right.
And knowing that about myself, being able to use exercise as a tool and as a coping mechanism to depression and my mental health, I mean, that works for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I need to keep that up.
So if you could give one piece of advice to the people out there who are struggling to just take that first step into any gym. I'm not saying here, taking their first step into focusing more on themselves and less on everybody else in their life, what would you say?
Oh, geez. I would just say it's such an easy thing to say, but I would say show up, because if you're interested in something, you show up that first day, and if it's not something you end up liking, there's no harm, no foul there. It is the easiest thing to say and the hardest thing to do. But that is what I told myself. So I guess that's how I kicked myself in the butt, I guess. Was I just said, you just have to show up one day. And if you show up one day and you want to show up the next day, and then you just keep taking it day by day until all of a sudden it's part of your routine.
Right, cool. So with that being said, guys, if there's any questions, let us know. If not, we're going to wrap things up with Tricia. Thank you so much. I know that this isn't an easy topic to talk about. It really isn't. It's a lot of tough topics to talk about, but I think you gave a lot of insight, a lot of inspiration, and a lot of motivation to probably a lot of people that are watching out there who will watch this. And the biggest thing for us on these shows is as long as you can touch one person, that's all that matters, because that's just one more person that can take that next step into whatever issues that they're having and make a positive change for themselves. So if anybody has, I don't know if there's any questions on Instagram or anything like that. We lost Facebook Live, but that's okay. We'll post the video on Facebook so that we can see the interview. But anything else you want to add, Tricia? Anything that you feel like you just on your chest you want to share in the last 60 seconds?
Last 60 seconds. If anybody wants to talk to me about anything, you can. I'm pretty recognizable. I usually am at 5:15 or 6:20 during the week. And friend me on Facebook, message me, whatever. I'm pretty open book about stuff like that.
And you're Tricia Hewson Miller.
I'm Tricia Miller Hewson. Miller's my maiden name. Yeah, it's complicated.
So Tricia Miller Hewson on Facebook. You guys can tag in the comments if you guys have questions for her, but if not, we're signing out. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye. Yay. Nice job.
Thank you.